That afternoon, as the last light of day streamed through the window, I heard footsteps in the hallway. That familiar click of heels I could recognize anywhere. The door opened, and Clara walked in as if she had just returned from a luxurious vacation, not after vanishing for an entire week without a word. She smiled faintly, slipped off her shoes, and dropped her purse onto the sofa. Movements so casual they felt almost arrogant. No apology. No hint of guilt. "I just needed some time away from you, Thomas," she said, her tone light, careless, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. I looked at her. No anger, no shouting, just silence. A long, heavy silence. She didn't realize that silence was the most frightening thing of all. I asked, "And you didn't think I deserved to know where you went?" Clara turned to me, her gaze cold, distant. "You should be grateful I came back. Many wouldn't have." I nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right." I took a deep breath, felt the air move through my chest, but instead of fury, what I felt was strange calm. "I'm glad you enjoyed your time away," I said softly, "because from now on you'll have all the time in the world." She frowned, confused. I turned away, walking toward the oak desk near the window, where the light from the setting sun lay across its surface. I opened the top drawer. Inside was a black folder, the one I had kept there all week, waiting for this exact moment. I picked it up, feeling the weight of paper, of proof, of truth. "What's that?" Clara asked, her voice suddenly losing its usual confidence. "Open it," I said calmly, almost gently. She hesitated, then took the folder from my hand. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. I stood still, watching the light fall across her face as she pulled out the first photograph. The color drained from her cheeks within seconds, pale as though the blood had left her body. A second photo slipped out, then a third. Her breathing grew uneven, a faint gasp breaking through the quiet. "Thomas, where did you get this?" "I had a week to prepare," I replied, "and I used it well." She took a step back, stammering, You had someone follow me?" I sat down, crossed my legs, and looked out the window at the amber sky. "I didn't follow you, Clara. I just found the truth, and I found all of it." The room went still. Only the soft ticking of the clock filled the space, each second marking the slow unraveling of 30 years. Clara tried to speak, but no words came. The folder slipped from her hands, photographs sliding across the wooden floor. Fragments of betrayal scattered in the fading light. I rose, stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "I think it's time we were honest with each other, just once in our lives." She looked up at me, eyes wide, shining but dry. And in them I saw one thing: fear. And I knew in that moment this was only the beginning. Clara sank into the chair, clutching the folder as if it might disappear if she let go. I stood still, watching the woman I'd lived beside for over 30 years, and realizing I no longer recognized her. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A week," I replied. "Coincidentally, the same week you disappeared." She looked up, eyes red. "You had no right." "I had every right, Clara," I said evenly. "When I'm the one being betrayed." The air thickened between us. The ticking clock sounded like a blade slicing through time. I looked at the photos scattered across the floor. Clara and a younger man walking hand in hand out of a riverside hotel. Each image was a wound, but what hurt most wasn't what I saw. It was the familiarity in her smile, the same smile that once belonged to me. I sat down, voice low. "Last week, while you were gone, I stopped looking for reasons. I started looking for the truth." She stayed silent. I began to tell her. 3 weeks earlier, the cracks had begun to show. Late-night messages, yoga classes that ran until 10, restaurant receipts I'd never seen before. As an architect, I've learned to notice the smallest fractures before a structure collapses. But this time, I looked away, until the silence became too loud to ignore. One Monday morning, I called an old acquaintance, Mason Clark, a former detective turned private investigator. He didn't ask many questions, just one. "How much truth do you really want, Mr. Reed?" "All of it," I said. We met at a small cafe in downtown Portland. I still remember the smell of roasted beans, the hum of quiet conversation, and the way Mason looked at me, like a man who's seen hundreds of marriages crumble and knew mine would be another. "I need to know where she goes, who she's with, and how long it's been," I said. He nodded, jotting notes. "And when you know, what will you do?" I hesitated. "I don't know, but I can't keep living blind." 3 days later, Mason called. "I've got something." He handed me a thick folder, photographs of Clara and a man outside a coastal hotel at a high-end restaurant in a downtown parking lot. I remember the first photo, and how everything inside me went silent. Not fury, but a strange, hollow stillness. "Who is he?" I asked. "Victor Lang," Mason said. 45, real estate, divorced. The name sounded faintly familiar. I'd once found his business card in Clara's coat pocket months ago. She told me he was a client. Mason continued, "And here are the bank statements. Small transfers, 300, 500, 1,000, all from your joint account to his. Over $40,000 in 2 years. I stared at the number, but it barely registered. It was like looking at the blueprint of a building already reduced to dust. The damage had been done. Mason sighed. "I know it's a hard hit, Mr. Reed, but don't let anger lead the way. Let justice do it." "I'm not looking for justice," I said quietly. "I'm looking for an ending." The room returned to silence. Clara sat across from me, pale and trembling. "Why?" I asked, not shouting, not shaking. "I just want to understand why." She lowered her eyes, her voice barely audible. "I don't know. Maybe I felt invisible. Maybe I wanted to feel alive again." I gave a faint smile, not bitter, just tired. "You did feel alive, Clara. You just chose to live inside a lie." She bowed her head, sobbing. I stepped closer, picked up the photos one by one, and stacked them neatly. "Don't cry," I said softly, as if comforting someone else. "This is only the beginning. We still have much to talk about." That night, the house finally fell quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comforts, but the kind that makes memories speak. I sat there, staring at the space she used to fill, and realized the present had nothing left to give me but echoes. So I turned to the past, to the mornings and the small rituals. And somewhere in that soft light, the first cracks began to show. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when things began to crack. Maybe there was no single moment. Like a building I once designed, the exterior looked solid, but deep inside, the joints had been breaking for a long time. 30 years of marriage weren't perfect, but they were steady. And for someone like me, steadiness was everything. Every morning I woke at 6. I brewed coffee with the old machine we bought on our trip to Italy 15 years ago. The smell filled the kitchen, a quiet soundtrack to stability. At 7 sharp, Clara would come down the stairs, hair tousled, still half asleep. I always had her mug ready. 2 spoons of sugar, no cream, just the way she liked it. She'd smile, rest her chin on my shoulder, and whisper, "You're the only one who knows exactly how I like it." And I believed her. Breakfast was simple: toast, strawberry jam, orange juice. We talked about the weather, the neighbors, work, small, seemingly meaningless conversations that formed the rhythm of a shared life. At 8, I drove to my architecture firm downtown. I'd worked there for 25 years, nothing glamorous but enough to give us this home, those summer trips, and a sense of security I thought would last forever. In the evenings, I came home around 6. Clara would be in the living room, watching the news or talking on the phone. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Same as always," she'd say with a soft smile. That same answer, day after day. Background music you stop hearing after a while. Fridays were our nights out, a small Italian place near the river. Same table, same checkered tablecloth, same bottle of wine the owner brought without asking. I ordered pasta, she ordered grilled salmon, and we shared a slice of tiramisu. I used to think, we're peaceful. But peace isn't the same as happiness. Then came the small changes, the first hairline fractures in the foundation. Clara started checking her phone more often, during meals, during movies, before bed. The blue glow of the screen lit her face in the dark, and she smiled, but not at me. "Who is it?" I asked one night. "Alyssa," she said quickly. "She's telling me a story." Alyssa, her lifelong friend, the perfect excuse. Then came the late meetings with friends, the work dinners she never had before. "You've been busy lately," I said once. "It's good to get out," she replied. "I need some air." And I smiled, pretending to be supportive, because that's what a good husband is supposed to do. But what I didn't realize was that each time she walked out that door, a part of me stayed behind and never came back. The changes kept coming. New perfume, stronger, more expensive, new dresses, ones I'd never seen before. "I've had this for months," she said. But I remembered every detail about her. I always had. One night in bed, I said quietly, "You've changed, Clara." She turned away. "People have to change, Thomas. It keeps life interesting." "And what about marriage?" She said nothing. From that night on, I knew something in her had already left. We still lived under the same roof, ate at the same table, slept in the same bed. Yet the distance between us was only a blanket wide, but deeper than an ocean. Intimacy faded. First, a missed touch. Then, silence. "Tired?" she'd ask. "Work's been tough lately," I'd lie. Not out of shame, but fear. Fear of acknowledging the void between us. My brother Daniel visited once. He looked around and asked, "Something going on between you two?" I smiled. "No, we're fine." He took a sip of coffee, studying me. "Fine is the most dangerous word in marriage, you know." I didn't answer. I just stared at the cup. The foam had long gone cold. If I've learned anything, it's this. Marriages don't fall apart in arguments. They crumble in silence. I remember that night vividly. A cold Thursday, rain drizzling softly, the glow of streetlights shimmering on my windshield. I left the office early, head aching, planning to stop by our favorite Italian restaurant to pick up some pasta for dinner. A harmless habit. But that habit changed everything. When my car stopped at the intersection by the river through the rain-specked glass, I saw Clara. She was sitting inside the restaurant, our table by the window. But she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her. I couldn't see his face clearly, only his hand, tanned, steady, resting on hers. A small gesture, but it froze me. I stood there, surrounded by strangers, by moving cars, by rain, yet the world seemed to stop. She smiled. That smile, once mine, now belonged to someone else. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell or make a scene. I just watched, like a stranger peering through glass at his own life. 5 minutes passed, or maybe a lifetime. Then I turned away. I drove home in silence, the wipers moving rhythmically. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of me. I sat in the dark living room, lights off. The clock ticked. 9, 10, 11. When the door opened, she stepped in, damp from the rain, hair tousled, smiling lightly. "I'm home," she said casually. I looked at her, my voice steady. "Where were you?" She blinked. "I told you, dinner with Alyssa." "Where?" that new Japanese place downtown. A lie, smooth, effortless. Did you have fun? She smiled. I did. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just betrayal. It was an art form of deceit. I could have confronted her right there. I could have shouted, demanded answers, thrown her out. But I didn't, because deep down, I wasn't ready to lose her. I've spent my life in logic, blueprints, measurements, balance, but marriage doesn't follow design. And when it collapses, you don't run. You just watch it fall, piece by piece, helpless. That night I lay beside her, listening to her steady breathing. How could she sleep so peacefully while I was dying beside her? I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, moonlight spilling through the curtains, tracing shadows like cracks across the walls of a house that no longer felt like home. The next morning, I still made coffee. She came down, kissed my cheek, and said, "Thank you, you're the best." I smiled weakly. Just doing what I always do. She never noticed. She never would. From that day, I began to observe, not like a suspicious husband, but like an architect inspecting the foundation of a structure he knows is about to fail. Receipts in her purse, new perfume, deleted messages. One afternoon, while she showered, I unlocked her phone. The password was our wedding date. The screen opened, and 3 messages were enough to destroy me. Miss your arms. Tuesday, same place. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. 3 lines, 3 bullets. I put the phone back exactly where it was. No tears, no shouting, just the sound of water from the shower, truth dripping slowly, unstoppable. That night, I opened my laptop and typed into Google, "Private Investigator in Portland." When the results appeared, I knew I had crossed a line, from trust to truth. 3 days after I typed "Private Investigator in Portland," I received a call, a deep, steady voice on the other end. "Mr. Reed, this is Mason Clark. You contacted my office. We should meet." We chose a small cafe tucked away in a quiet alley, the kind of place where strangers don't ask questions and friends never show up. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat in the corner, and ordered an Americano I didn't drink. 10 minutes later, a man in his 40s walked in. White shirt, black tie, eyes sharp but not cold. He shook my hand firmly and said, "I need to know what you're looking for, Mr. Reed, because once I start, I can't stop halfway." "I'm looking for the truth," I replied, "no matter how much it hurts." He nodded, opened his notebook. Name, habits, where she goes, her schedule. The more details, the better. I told him everything, the yoga nights, the late messages, the perfume, the mysterious friend named Victor Lang. Mason listened silently. When I finished, he looked up. "I've done this for 15 years, he said. "And I always ask my clients one thing. Are you sure you want to know?" I met his gaze. "Do I have a choice?" "No," he said quietly, "but sometimes not knowing helps people sleep at night." I smiled faintly. "I haven't slept well in 2 years." He nodded. "You'll hear from me within a week." But only 3 days later, my phone rang. "Mr. Reed," Mason said, "I've got what you asked for." That afternoon was gray and cold. I sat at the same table as before. Mason arrived, carrying a thick brown folder under his arm. No small talk, no preamble. He placed it on the table. The sound was soft but final, like the fall of something that would never rise again. "Prepare yourself," he said. "What's inside won't be easy." "I'm ready," I lied. He opened the folder. The first photo, Clara leaving a riverside hotel, hand in hand with a man. The second, the 2 of them in a dim bar, golden light on her smiling face. The third, his lips brushing her forehead. Each photo was a blade, but I kept looking. I'd spent my life studying the smallest cracks in blueprints. I couldn't look away from the cracks in my own life. "Who is he?" I asked. "Victor Lang," Mason replied. 45, real estate, divorced, lives alone. The name rang a bell. I remembered finding his business card in Clara's coat months ago. She said he was a client. Mason continued, I checked your joint accounts. Small, consistent transfers. 300, 500, 1,000. Over 2 years, more than $40,000 to Lang's account. He slid the papers toward me. The numbers were clear, merciless. Dates I recognized, even our wedding anniversary. She had wired him money that day. She used our money, I murmured. My money. Mason nodded. You could take legal action if you want, but right now you probably just need air. I said nothing. Outside, rain started to fall, slow and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of someone barely holding on. Anything else? I asked finally. Yes, he said softly. Messages. Not many, but enough. He pulled out printed pages. I read the first few lines. You make me feel young again. Wish we could be together forever. I'll leave him soon. I stopped there. My eyes locked on one word. Forever. The same word she had once said to me in church, in front of everyone. Now it was just an empty echo. Mason hesitated, then spoke quietly. This is the hardest part, Mr. Reed. My job ends here. What you do next is up to you. I nodded, slid the folder into my briefcase. Thank you, Mason, for not lying to me. He stood, resting a hand on my shoulder. There's no easy way through this, but listen to me. You still have your dignity. Don't lose it to anger. I didn't answer. I stared at the untouched coffee. The surface reflected the cloudy sky above, distorted and blurred, just like my life. When Mason left, I remained seated. The folder lay in front of me. 52 photos, 23 statements, 14 pages of messages. I looked at them one last time. Then I closed the briefcase. Not because I wasn't ready to face the truth, but because I was too tired to feel the pain any longer. I drove around the city for 2 hours after leaving Mason's cafe. The rain hadn't stopped, and Portland was painted in shades of gray, as if the whole world shared my grief. At a red light, I noticed a sign for a law office. Porter and Associates. The name sounded solid, like the foundation of a building that could withstand storms. I pulled over. A few minutes later, I walked in. A woman in her 30s, tall, hair tied neatly, stood from her desk and extended a hand. Rachel Porter, attorney, how can I help you? I need a divorce lawyer, I said simply. She paused, studying me. Her eyes weren't pitying or curious, just steady, professional, with a hint of compassion. Are you sure about this, Mr. Reed? I've never been sure of anything, she nodded. Then we'll do this the right way. No drama, no noise, just facts and law. That's exactly what I want. Rachel opened her notebook and listened as I told her everything, the investigation, the bank transfers, the evidence Mason had gathered. She didn't interrupt, only wrote, asking short, precise questions. After nearly an hour, she closed her notebook. You've done the hardest part already, she said. You stayed calm. Most people ruin their chances by letting emotion drive. But you've already taken control. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just out of emotions. That's not loss, she said. That's the beginning of clarity. She spread a folder open between us. Here's what we'll do. First, close all joint accounts. Open one in your name only. Second, review property documents. If her name appears, we transfer it out. Third, file for divorce with grounds of adultery and misuse of joint funds. Lastly, prepare a property settlement. You'll keep the house, the car, and the bulk of the savings. She looked up, meeting my eyes through her thin glasses. This won't be an easy process, Mr. Reed, but if you walk through it with me, you'll come out with your dignity intact. I was silent for a moment. And her? What does Clara get? Rachel's voice was steady. The freedom she wanted so much. That line echoed in my head the rest of the day. 3 days later, Rachel called. "All documents are ready. We just need your signature. Then I'll prepare the filing." I signed. No hesitation. That night, I sat in my study, staring at a copy of our marriage certificate. The line that once read, "Till death do us part," now looked like a design flaw, a structure doomed by a weak foundation. I didn't hate Clara anymore. I just felt tired, like an architect standing among ruins, realizing there's nothing left to fix, only one choice: demolish and begin again. Rachel's words came back to me. "Your calm isn't weakness, Mr. Reed. It's disciplined strength." Disciplined strength. I repeated it to myself until it became a kind of prayer. From then on, I lived like a man rebuilding himself. In the morning, I still made coffee, still went to work, still said, "I'm fine." But every night after Clara fell asleep, I cleaned, packed, organized papers, preparing for her to leave. No tears, no hope, just a plan. Precise, deliberate, like the final blueprint before demolition. One evening, I called Rachel. If she comes back, apologizes, wants to start over, can I withdraw the filing? Rachel paused. "You can, but ask yourself, Mr. Reed, do you want to save the marriage, or are you just afraid of being alone?" The question silenced me. Later that night, I stepped outside. The air was cold, the garden damp from rain. I looked at the house I had designed brick by brick. It was no longer a home. It was a museum of memories, and I realized some structures can't be repaired. They can only collapse, so you can learn to rebuild from the wreckage. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, the air didn't hurt. For the first time, I wasn't angry. For the first time, I wasn't sad. I was simply free. Friday morning, as I read the paper at the kitchen table, Clara came downstairs with a silver suitcase. "I'm going to Palm Beach for a few days," she said lightly, as if announcing a trip to the store. "With who?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "With Alyssa, of course," she replied, not blinking. "She needs a break, and so do I." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "How long?" 5 or 6 days. "Well," I said with a faint smile, "you deserve it." She smiled back, genuine or pretending to be. I couldn't tell anymore. Then she kissed my cheek, said goodbye, and rolled her suitcase toward the door. The sound of the wheels against the wooden floor was rhythmic, deliberate, the last echo of a marriage about to end. I stood by the window, watching as the taxi carried her away. Strangely, I didn't feel pain, not anger, just a hollow sense of relief. When her car turned the corner, I turned too, back into the house. The silence was absolute. The clock's ticking seemed louder than ever. And I began. First, I changed the locks. Every one of them, front door, garage, back gate. Each click of the new key felt like sealing the past shut. Next, I called the bank using the checklist Rachel had sent. When the clerk asked for a reason to close the joint accounts, I said simply, "Because there's nothing joint about us anymore." Then I walked through the house, room by room, removing her things, clothes, shoes, frames, perfume, magazines. I packed them carefully into 27 cardboard boxes, labeling each. Bedroom, Clara's belongings. The tape tearing across the cardboard sounded like old memories ripping apart. At her vanity table, I stopped. There was a small glass bottle of amber perfume. I opened it, inhaled. That scent once meant peace, love, home. Now it was just a vapor of what used to be. I placed it gently into the last box and sealed it shut. That afternoon, I called Rachel. "She's gone," I said. "Good," she replied. "It's the perfect time. I'll send you the final documents tonight. By the time she's back, everything will be ready." I thanked her and hung up. As dusk fell, I stood in the living room, taking it all in. The house, emptier but cleaner. Every trace of Clara was boxed away, leaving only the space for truth. In the garage, the boxes were lined neatly. Among them, 2 envelopes I had prepared. The black envelope, holding every piece of evidence, photos, statements, messages. The white envelope, a letter addressed to her family, to be delivered if she refused to sign. I placed the black envelope on the dining table, right in the center. It looked ordinary, almost harmless, yet inside was the verdict on a marriage. The white envelope went into the safe, just in case. The next 3 days passed quietly. I worked, cooked, cleaned, but oddly, I didn't feel lonely. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It felt mine. I rearranged my studio, took down old photos, started sketching again. The first design in months was a small, single-story home, open windows, filled with light. I titled it Blueprint for Solitude. On the 5th day, I got a haircut. The barber asked, "Haven't seen you in a while, Mr. Reed? Special occasion?" I smiled. Just wanted to see a different version of myself. That night, I wore a new white shirt, sat on the porch, and poured a glass of wine. The rain started, soft, steady, cleansing. I thought of Clara. No anger, no longing, just one quiet word in my mind. Over. At midnight, I looked at the black envelope resting on the table. I knew, when she came back, it would open, and everything would end. But in that darkness, I realized something else. A new chapter was already being written, quietly, without noise or witness. And for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. Sunday afternoon. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. I had cleaned the house, brewed coffee, and put on my new white shirt. Everything was ready, myself included. At 2 o'clock sharp, Rachel arrived. She carried a leather briefcase and the calm expression of someone who'd seen too many endings. "Are you sure you want me here?" she asked. "I want a witness," I said. "Not because I'm afraid of her, but because I want this done cleanly." She nodded. "Then I'll observe. Only step in if necessary." We sat in the living room. The black envelope rested on the coffee table, a silent blade waiting to be drawn. At 5:15, a car pulled up outside. The sound of a key that didn't fit, then knocking. "Thomas, why doesn't my key work?" I rose, walked slowly to the door. When I opened it, Clara stood there, suntanned, smiling, a smile that died the moment she saw Rachel inside. "What's going on? Who's this?" "I'm Rachel Porter, Mr. Reed's attorney," Rachel said evenly. "Attorney?" Clara's voice faltered. "Thomas, what is this?" I didn't answer. I walked to the table, picked up the black envelope. "Sit down, Clara." "I'm not sitting until you tell me what—" "Sit down." My voice was calm, but it carried weight. She obeyed, setting her purse beside her. "This," I said, placing the envelope on the table, "is all the explanation you need." She stared at it as if it might explode. "What is it?" "Open it." Hesitant, she opened the flap. The first photo, her and Victor Lang, hand in hand outside a hotel. The second, dinner at a dim restaurant. The third, a kiss on the forehead. I watched her face lose color, watched realization sink in. "You followed me?" she whispered. "No," I said. "I just looked for the truth." She flipped through the papers, bank statements, messages, transfers. "No, this isn't—" "It is," I said quietly. "You sent him over $40,000 of our money, paid for hotels with our joint card." "Thomas, you don't understand. Don't," I interrupted. "I don't want another lie." Silence. The air was thick, unbreathable. Rachel sat still, watching like a quiet judge. "You did all this to get back at me?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said. I did this to get my life back." Rachel opened her briefcase, pulled out a stack of documents. "Mrs. Reed," she began, "these are divorce papers, citing infidelity and misuse of marital funds. Mr. Reed is not pursuing compensation. He only seeks closure, quietly." Clara turned to me, panic in her eyes. "You can't do this. I have nothing." "You have freedom," I said. "The thing you've been chasing for 2 years. Please, Thomas, we can talk. We can—" There's nothing left to say. I reached into the cabinet, retrieved the white envelope, and set it beside her. "If you refuse to sign, this letter goes to your family, your mother, your brothers, your friends, every photo, every message." Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't dare!" "I dared to trust you for 30 years, Clara," I said. "What else do you think I wouldn't dare?" Her shoulders trembled. Rachel slid a pen toward her. "You can sign here, here, and here." The ticking clock was the only sound as she signed, each stroke of ink closing a door. When she was done, I said softly, "It's over." She looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You hate me that much?" I looked at her for a long moment. "No, hate would mean I still feel something." Rachel gathered the papers. "Everything's in order. I'll file these tomorrow morning." She nodded at me and left quietly. Clara stood, voice shaking. "What do you want me to do now?" "Leave," I said simply. "Your things are in the garage. You have 1 week to collect them. After that, whatever's left is trash." She took a hesitant step, then turned. "Thomas, I'm sorry." I said nothing. She waited. Nothing came. Finally, she opened the door and walked out, dragging her suitcase behind her. The door closed with a heavy click. Final, absolute, like a gavel hitting wood. I stood there, listening to her car fade down the street. Then I turned, picked up the empty black envelope, and tossed it into the fireplace. The flame took, fast and hungry, ink turning to smoke, faces to ash, the room briefly glowing with a heat that felt almost like relief. Smoke curled upward, then vanished into the ceiling, just like she had. The next morning, the house was silent, unnervingly silent. No footsteps on the wood floor, no faint scent of perfume, no voice humming from the kitchen, only the ticking of the coffee machine and the rain tapping against the window. I sat down, took my first sip of coffee as a single man. It was bitter, but clean. For the first time in months, I realized I was actually breathing. My phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. "The papers are filed. Everything's official. Congratulations, Thomas. You can start again now." Start again. 2 simple words, 30 years of meaning. I looked around the house. Every corner carried traces of Clara, but they no longer hurt. They were just remnants of a life that no longer belonged to me. I spent the morning cleaning, taking down the wedding photos, removing her curtains, washing the sheets. Each small task felt like drawing lines on a new blueprint, deliberate, steady, healing. That afternoon, Marcus, my younger brother, dropped by. He didn't speak at first, just stood at the doorway, studying me. "You doing okay, Tom?" he finally asked. "I am," I said. And this time, it wasn't a lie. We sat in the kitchen. I poured coffee. He waited in silence. After a while, he said, "Mom heard. Clara called her, said you threw her out with nothing." But Mom didn't believe her. She said, "Thomas never does anything without reason." I smiled faintly. Mom's always been wiser than I gave her credit for. "You want to tell me what happened?" Marcus asked. I looked out the window at the soft drizzle. "No need. It's over, and I don't want to live in the ending anymore." Marcus nodded. "You look different." "How so?" "Like a man who just dropped a weight he'd been carrying too long." He was right, completely right. 3 days passed, no calls, no messages. I figured Clara had left town, or simply had nothing left to say. While watering the garden, Mrs. Thompson, my elderly neighbor, called over the fence. "Clara gone on a trip?" "She's gone," I said with a small smile. She nodded once, didn't ask more. Some things grown-ups just understand without needing words. That night I sat in the living room. The walls glowed in soft lamplight, empty but peaceful. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was mine. I turned on some jazz, something Clara used to hate. The saxophone curled through the air, cleansing the corners of the house. A few days later, a call came from an unknown number. "Mr. Reed." "Yes?" "This is Mason Clark. Just checking in. How are you?" "I'm okay," I said. "Honestly?" He chuckled softly. "Good. One more thing. Thought you should know. The guy, Victor Lang, he dumped her. Apparently, he only stayed because of the money. When the accounts closed, he disappeared." I was quiet for a long moment. Finally, I said, "I'm not happy to hear that, Mason. I just pity her." "Pity?" "Yeah, she destroyed herself for something that was never real." Mason paused. "You're a decent man, Mr. Reed. Don't let this world take that from you." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. Days turned into weeks. I started reading again. Real books, not just blueprints. I jogged in the mornings. I called my mother more often. I cooked and began to truly taste what I made. One morning, pouring coffee, I realized something. I hadn't thought of Clara all week. No images, no anger, no what-ifs. Just a quiet space, empty, but peaceful. That afternoon, Marcus stopped by again. He looked at me and said, "You know, I think you've won." "I didn't win," I replied. "I just stopped losing myself." That night I stepped outside with a glass of wine. The rain had passed. The moon hung low and soft above the rooftops. In the reflection on the glass door, I saw a 58-year-old man, silver in his hair, light in his eyes. My life had cracked apart, yes, but I was still whole, and maybe that was enough. If my story makes you pause for a moment to think of someone, or maybe of yourself, then I suppose I've done what I hope to do. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because I believe that every pain shared becomes a little lighter, and every scar spoken aloud turns into a lesson for someone else. I've lost many things, a wife, a past, a part of my heart. But through all that loss, I found something far greater, myself. If you're listening to me right now, tell me, where are you, and what time is it where you are? Let this old man know that somewhere out there, hearts are still listening. People still understand that sometimes losing isn't the end. It's just life's quiet way of asking us to begin again with a stronger heart.